Okay, so in this video, we're going to take a look at nested if statements. And it's not a terribly difficult concept. The idea is just sometimes you might want to ask one if, and then if it's true, you want to ask another question, and maybe another question, and maybe another question. And you can do that in Python just by layering in these if statements or nesting these if statements. So let's take a look at this code. It's based on the same code that we've been playing with in these other videos for this section. And so we can see if price is greater than target price, we're going to ask one of the questions, but then we're going to get some more information. Well, let's look and see if price is more than 2 times the target price. And if so, we'll say, whoa, super expensive. Otherwise, we'll say pretty expensive. And so then if it's greater than the target price, we're only going to run this logic if it's greater than the target price. And you may say, well, I could have just put that if statement right after the first one. That's true, but what if you want to check something completely different? What if we want to come down here and we're going to attach this to the else, because it doesn't matter where we attach it. If name equals Bob, we could say Bob can't afford that. Okay, so we can layer this in all sorts of interesting ways, and we can go many, many levels deep. So let's take a look. We may have made some mistakes, so it's always important to check to see if we've made some mistakes. Let's run it. Okay, so it looks pretty good. So price is greater than target price. Let's try and work it through ourselves. So we should have printed or is not greater than target price. So we should have just printed not very expensive and we want this. And that's what we did. So let's make it a little bit more expensive. Let's change this to $7.50, which is definitely greater than the target price, and let's give it a shot. So in this case, we said, is $7.50 greater than $6? Yep. So we're going to print, are you sure you want this? And there it is. Then we're going to ask another question. Is it more than 2 times the target price? Well, no, 7.5 is less than 12. And one note about this, you'll notice I put the target price times 2 inside of parentheses. If you are really good at Python, you might know that this, what order of precedence this takes in comparison to multiplication. But especially when you're starting out in Python, I don't recommend you try and remember all that stuff at once. So it's safe to put any calculations you want in a Boolean expression inside parentheses. That way you can just use the math logic here and not worry about what precedence the greater than, less than, and equal symbols take. Okay? It's just a good practice, and it doesn't hurt the readability at all. So you'll do notice then I do have to have 2 closed parentheses here. Okay? So if it was greater than 12, we would have printed, whoa, super expensive. But it's not. So we printed pretty expensive right here, because that's the else, and there it is right there. But notice we do one more thing, and this is where the nesting is really useful. We're going to check something wildly different. We're going to then say to check to see if the name is Bob, and if it is, print Bob can't afford that. And notice I do not have an else here. So this is one of the nice things about Python, is because of this lineup, even though this next word is else, because it's lined up with this if statement here, we know this else is attached to this if, not this one, even though it doesn't have an else attached to it. That's called a dangling else. We don't have to worry about them in Python because we just can look straight down and see this else is attached to this if. This else is attached to this if. It's not attached to this if. Okay, so that's nesting. It's just layering more if statements inside of other if statements. But it allows us to create some very, very complex structures, which is awesome. Okay, so in the next one, we're going to see a way that we can get around sort of checking lots of different conditions at once called an elif.